Let's welcome in CBS Sports college football expert, three-time SEC Coach of the Year and former Razorbacks head coach Houston Nutt, getting us ready for the SEC on CBS. Coach, overall, though, and I'm not sure how many people you're still talking to in Fayetteville, I want to get a temperature check for what's going on there. Arkansas coming off that loss to A&M. I know fans were very disappointed in that, but there's a lot of belief in this team that they can give Alabama a run for its money.
Absolutely. Boy, you talk about disappointment. That was a big disappointment. In Jerry's world in Arlington, they really wanted that game versus Texas A&M and had their chances. And so had to go back to work. But the thing about, I think, Coach Sam Pittman, he'll do a good job of getting these guys rallied up again and get them going. They're playing so hard. And when they look at the film versus Texas A&M, they'll see they had so many chances to win that game. And so now you got to put that behind you. You're playing the mighty Alabama football team, but they believe that they can beat Alabama. And so I'm really looking for a great game.
Coach, talk to us about KJ Jefferson. So far, the number's not in his favor facing ranked versus unranked teams. He's 9-2 against unranked teams. That's great. 3-5 against top 25 teams. What have you seen so far from him this season, and how are you evaluating his play heading into Saturday?
KJ Jefferson, he slimmed down a little bit. He's a big guy. 6'3", about 235. He was probably 250 last year. He is faster than you think. Not a burner, but he keeps the defensive coordinators awake at night because you got to account for him. And so with Rocket Sanders as your tailback, the offensive line of Arkansas is very, very good. They're big, they're strong, they get tremendous push up front. And so KJ Jefferson has been doing a good job. Now, he turned the ball over last week. You got to take care of the ball, and he knows that. But he throws the deep ball extremely well. And with the RPO, the quick screens and all those things, he's been very accurate. His receivers are getting better. You lose a Treylon Burks, and the other guys had to step up. And you look at Hazelwood, you look at some of these guys, they're stepping up, and I think they're playing very well. This is a big, big week. This is a big week. And I really feel like Arkansas will be ready to go. And it's because KJ Jefferson really gives them a chance. When you look in the league of the SEC, it's the quarterbacks. The one that has the quarterbacks are the teams that have the best chance to win. And KJ has experience. He played all last year. This year, he's gotten better, has a better command of the offense. And you got to account for the guy. The guy can run, hard to tackle, and they got to just take care of the ball. You can't give Alabama any gifts, as you know.
Somebody who's already proven themselves as a quarterback continues to do so this season. Now the second favorite to repeat as Heisman winner is Bryce Young. So let's look at this Alabama offense versus this Arkansas defense. People out there might not be aware, Arkansas has 20 sacks on the season. That is 4 more than any other team in the nation. When you look at Bryce Young against this Alabama pass rush, how are you looking at it?
Arkansas, they've given up some pass yardage. And the secondary has to keep everything in front. But you hit on a very key point. They're the #1 sack team in America. And so they got to use that to their advantage. Keep your eyes on this player, Drew Sanders. Why? He used to play at Alabama, transferred to Arkansas, and he's got about 4 or 5 sacks already this year. Keep your eyes on him. So fast. He's about 6'5". He's 230, runs 4.5. He's been a playmaker deluxe. So Arkansas has got to mix up some blitzes. Barrett has got to do a great job of keeping Bryce Young off balance, which is very, very hard. But you have to disrupt him. You just can't let him sit in the pocket all day because he's so good. And so to me, that's one of the strong points of Arkansas is the sacks. And so if they can get pressure on Bryce Young, that will help them because they've got to get off the field and they got to allow their offense to stay on the field. So I really think it's the biggest reason they could do this, accomplish this goal, is with the defense and the defensive front mixing up the blitzes.
Coach, you've talked about how much this game means to folks there in Fayetteville and Arkansas. And I mean, look, they haven't beaten Alabama in the past 15 matchups between these two teams. So they have nothing to lose in this game. I mean, yes, there's things to lose, but how much does Alabama need to prove itself in this game? They've had 4 games. Things got a little squirrely with Texas there. They've been pretty balanced so far, but what does this game mean to the Crimson Tide?
Well, the Crimson Tide, Coach Saban, he knows this. This will be a very difficult game on the road. They're going to be 72,500 rocking Razorback fans calling the Hogs every play. They'll play every play, and so it's a true road focus you must have. And for them to reach their goals, to win the SEC championship, you got to win this game. And so I think it's very, very important. And it's easy to think, okay, we beat Vanderbilt, we got Arkansas, they just got beat. But this atmosphere will be so intense. And Arkansas fans, the one thing that I know, they respect Alabama and they want this game so bad. And so the players they were licking their wounds because of Texas A&M. I know they were sick, but you can bet this, they will be focused and ready to go. And because they have so much respect for Alabama, this is their Super Bowl. I believe that. And so I can't wait for the game. I think it's going to be outstanding. And Alabama will have to play its best game of the year to beat them.
Both of them, for that matter. Both of them need to play their best game of the year in order to get the win in this one. I was listening to 3 Arkansas podcasts before I came on with you, and all of them were just focused on, we can do this, we can do this. So here's the thing. Arkansas even has more fire under them when it comes to the odd makers because Alabama favored by 17 now on the road in this game, the total 61. Talk to us about how you see this game playing out.
I think it's a little bit too much of a number. Now, I have a lot of respect for Alabama, but, man, I don't think Alabama is just like they've been, let's say, the last few years. Now, they're good, yes. Bryce Young, we know he's a Heisman Trophy candidate, but I don't think there's a Waddle, a Devontae Smith, Julio Jones. I don't see that difference maker out there just yet. They may be coming. DeCorey Brooks, I know, is very good. He's coming, developing, getting better, but I don't see that true difference maker there. Offensive line hadn't been as dominant as years past. We know Will Anderson is a great, great player. But again, just the dominating teams that we're used to seeing, that's why I feel like Arkansas will have a chance, a big chance. So I see this as a very, very close game. I would not be surprised of an upset right here. I wouldn't be surprised. So that's why you tune in to CBS and you watch this game right here all the way to the end.
Coach, we appreciate it. I have to promo the game, and you did it right there for me. This has upset alert written on it, according to Houston Nutt there. Safe travels this week. I know we're going to see a lot of Arkansas pig calls over the weekend on Saturday. Thanks so much, Coach.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The SEC on CBS, you heard it there. You want to watch this one from beginning to end. Number 2, Alabama on the road, facing its toughest opponent yet, number 20, Arkansas, Saturday, 3:30 on CBS.
Well, this game features a battle between 2 good quarterbacks in Heisman favorite Bryce Young and Heisman longshot KJ Jefferson. And for Jefferson, could that added running dimension we saw last week be a difference maker this week? We'll get into that with Chip Patterson and Barrett Sallee next. Arkansas quarterback KJ Jefferson took the loss last week to Texas A&M, but he became the first Razorbacks quarterback in more than 15 years to rush for over 100 yards in a game. He also rushed in their final score of that upset loss. Meanwhile, Bryce Young, he continues to hum along for Bama. 385 yards last week, 4 scores. Now, that's the highest yardage total for him this season and the 3rd highest of his Bama career. Both quarterbacks completing over 60% of their passes and have thrown for multiple touchdowns in every game this season. It is set up to be a great matchup. Let's get into it between these two with the rest of their respective teams and with our Cover 3 podcast gurus, Chip Patterson and Barrett Sallee. Gentlemen, Nick Saban's team remain number 2 in the AP poll. Chip, they've blown out the teams they should blow out, but that nail-biter against Texas raised some questions. Former Arkansas coach Houston Nutt saying Alabama might not be as scary as years past. Do you agree?
No, this is a terrifying team. This is 100% a team that you should fear. And I think that it's also trying to look back at years past and remember those teams being scarier, because I remember that Alabama was a 2-point conversion away from getting caught in a hairy situation against Florida just 1 year ago. And I remember that Bryce Young and Alabama were on the ropes against Auburn just 1 year ago. Like, is this the flying death machine that we saw in 2018 roll through the regular season, or the revenge season of 2020? No, certainly not. And there are a lot of places where you can pick nits, but this is way too early in the season. The places where we have concerns, there are options where we could see development. I'm looking at the wide receiver position. I'm looking at the offensive line. I think that this is a plenty scary team. I do not believe that suddenly in 2022 we've seen some drop off in the level of fright that we should have about the Crimson Tide.
I partially agree with you, Chip, but I don't think it's as scary as the 2020, the 2018 teams, like you said. And I don't even think it's as scary as last year's team, simply because there's not really a reference point quite yet. Last year's team was awful on the road, with the exception of the Mississippi State game. The one game they were on the road this year, they were awful. But I think contrary to last year, you don't know if their receivers are good. This time last year, we knew about Jamison Williams. We knew about John Mechie, all those guys. Ja'Cory Brooks has just sort of been okay. Jermaine Burton's been non-existent. Tyler Harrell hasn't even really played all that much. And Trayshawn Holden's been solid, but none of those receivers are difference makers. And that was the foundation of some of those juggernauts, specifically 2020 and 2018. So I partially agree with you, Chip. If you're comparing it to last year, I think, yeah, this team is a little comparable. But right now, I would say it is a little bit of a step back, because we don't know about the wide receivers, and because we really don't know where the offensive line is right now either.
And this is the first of 3 straight ranked games for Alabama in terms of their ranked opponents. All right, so let's talk keys to victory for Sam Pittman's team first. Barrett, walk us through what they need to do to get the upset here.
Well, I think there are 3 things. I think, one, those Bama receivers, you have to stop them. And really, that's easier said this year than it has been in years past, like I just said. So, do you shut down? Which one do you go after? Do you go after Trayshawn Holden? Do you say somebody else beat us? Do you say Jermaine Burton, somebody else beat us? I think that is relatively easy for this team. Granted, the execution might be a little bit more difficult because their pass defense has not been up to snuff, but Barry Odom's a good defensive coordinator. I think he's going to recognize how to scheme against some of these guys. The second is Drew Sanders. I don't think folks realize how good Drew Sanders has been for Arkansas. Former 5-star linebacker, played at Alabama, transferred to Arkansas over the past offseason, and he has been, in my opinion, the best linebacker in the entire conference, because, of course, Will Anderson is an edge rusher. But Drew also knows how Bill O'Brien's going to try to attack that defense. So I think that'll certainly help. And I think the third thing is, look, Arkansas's rushing attack is so unique because KJ Jefferson, in terms of how KJ runs, I'm not saying he is Cam Newton, but he runs in a similar fashion. And then when you combine that with Rocket Sanders, who has been awesome both between the tackles and on the edge, you've got one of the best and most diverse rushing attacks, I think, in the SEC, and that has got to keep Alabama's defense moving side to side, keep them guessing. We've seen mobile quarterbacks in the past hurt Alabama's defense, not so much recently as before when that was sort of a new phenomenon, but it still happens from time to time. So I think they need to get real creative with their rushing attack, and if they do, then they'll have a chance.
3 keys for an upset from me. Let's go with number 1 and the most important. This pass defense can't be Swiss cheese, all right? The Razorbacks got a really bad weakness, one place where you can pick them apart. Texas A&M didn't exactly have the personnel, especially after losing Aniyah Smith to an injury, to be able to do that. Well, I think that Bryce Young, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, who threw for more than 550 yards against the Razorbacks last year, yeah, he can pick apart this pass defense if they continue to have that kind of performance. If Arkansas is going to have an upset, they need to be able to prevent what Bryce Young is able to do through the passing game. Number 2, a lot of what Barrett was saying about KJ Jefferson, just let him cook on third down. I mean, there's going to be so many times where you just need to let KJ Jefferson be able to go and get you that first down, to be able to keep a drive alive, move the sticks, let him use his physicality. When Alabama gets over aggressive with the pass rush, give Jefferson the green light to take off and be able to just go and get that first down, to be able to keep Bryce Young from getting back on the field. And then finally, this is taking a note straight from what Texas was not able to do when it came time to try and pull the upset with the Crimson Tide in town, and that is getting touchdowns, not field goals, in the red zone. The inability to put 7 on the board instead of settling for 3 is the difference between Texas winning and losing. And if Arkansas is going to pull off the upset with Alabama in town, it cannot suffer that same fate. When they get a chance to be able to score in the red zone, do not settle for field goals. Make sure you punch it in for a touchdown.
And Arkansas have not beaten Alabama since Nick Saban's first year there, which was, of course, back in 2006. All right, the Tide are 17.5-point favorites, and given the history here, I mean, it makes sense. Only 4 of their last 15 games have been decided by 13 points or less, all in favor of Alabama. What do they need to do here, the Crimson Tide, to get us a cover, Chip?
Number one, we've talked about it all throughout this conversation. Wide receivers got to step up. We've been looking at that position, and that is so important when I go back to last year, because I mentioned that Bryce Young had 550 passing yards. You know who most of them were to? Jamison Williams and John Mechie, wide receivers that are not here helping Alabama in this spot. There are a lot of options who might be able to step up. One that I like a lot, but I do think that the wide receivers have got to be able to raise their level of play. They've got to be reliable for Bryce Young, because that is the one place where you could really pick apart this Arkansas defense. Number two, again, back to the same places where we have concerns about Alabama. The offensive line needs to win the line of scrimmage. And why do I mention that? Because Arkansas plays a lot of rush 3. You should have an advantage. You should be able to push this group around at the point of attack. Arkansas sometimes does a good job of filling those gaps with those linebackers, with those secondary players. But for Alabama, if you're going to cover this big number, you've got to be able to take advantage of that numbers advantage in the trenches. And finally, force Arkansas into 3rd and long, because that's when you can take Will Anderson. That's when you can take Dallas Turner, and you can just let them loose to be able to go after KJ Jefferson, prevent KJ Jefferson from being able to let those slow developing deep routes happen. And that's how you can really get Arkansas's offense off the field.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback with a lot of what Chip said. I think exploiting the secondary for Alabama is a must. And obviously, we've talked about the wide receivers and how they haven't necessarily stepped up. I think getting the running backs involved out of the backfield as receivers as well could be a big deal. We've seen Jahmyr Gibbs be a big time weapon in the passing game. Jace McClellan could do the same thing. They're kind of iffy at tight end with some injuries, but mix those tight ends in and really try to wear that secondary down. We know they can't cover all that well. If you get that secondary tired, if you're Alabama, then covering, I think, is going to be a lot easier. And the second is limit KJ. Limit KJ in a variety of different ways, but specifically on the ground. If you have to load the box and take some risks outside, trust your team's speed. If you're Alabama, Raheem Sanders is nicknamed Rocket for a reason, but Alabama's got a bunch of rockets in the secondary at linebacker as well. So if you need to count on them to be fundamentally sound and make open field tackles, do it, because the last thing you want to do is let KJ cook between the tackles as a rusher. And the third thing we saw on the road, Alabama's been really bad. 4 of their last 5 true road games have been 1-score games. And against Texas, we saw 13 penalties in the first half, 15 accepted penalties overall, and there were several more that got declined. You can't let that happen. That was a big reason why Texas hung around at that game, and you don't want to let that happen in front of what will be a raucous environment in Fayetteville. So the discipline obviously has been a problem in the past on the road. That should not happen anymore. Nick Saban obviously has a reference point this year to go back on to try to get them to understand exactly how they play within a road environment. So eliminate those penalties, because the last thing you need is Arkansas taking advantage of some of those.
And we mentioned 3 straight ranked games for Alabama. 2 of those will be on the road, so discipline is going to be key. Bryce Young gets the headlines and the Heisman pressure as the reigning Heisman winner. I mean, he should get that pressure. But which players are you watching this week in this one, Barrett?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback a little bit with what Chip said. I think exploiting the secondary for Alabama is a must. And obviously, we've talked about the wide receivers and how they Well, I think for Arkansas, it's Drew Sanders. I think he's probably the most underappreciated linebacker in the entire SEC. He makes tackles. He's good in open field. He gets behind the line, tackles for loss. I think for Drew, especially knowing sort of what Bill O'Brien's going to want to do offensively, he needs to have a big game. And I think he can if that offensive line for Alabama doesn't come together. We still don't know if it's fixed all of its problems from last year. So I think Drew Sanders is a guy you really have to watch out for. And on the Alabama side, Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back, he gets involved in the passing game. He's super fast on special teams. He gets involved. He can do a little bit of everything. So Jahmyr Gibbs, if Alabama does struggle to stretch the field, I think that Bill O'Brien will look around and say, all right, the one known commodity we have is Jahmyr Gibbs on the ground and as a receiver out of the backfield. Get a little creative with how you use him and at least try to exploit Arkansas secondary in that way.
Well, I'm glad that we've been able to give Raheem Rocket Sanders all the attention that he needs because, look, Arkansas, this is one of the most slept-on players in terms of being a huge part of their offense. I mean, he is leading the SEC right now with more than 125 yards per game, and he does it on just 20 attempts. I mean, he has to split some of these rushing attempts with KJ Jefferson, and he does more with them, more than 6 yards per attempt. And again, just 20 attempts per game, and yet he is number 1 in the SEC, and he is number 4 nationally with those numbers. This is somebody who, when you get everything else right, his explosive element can be able to make a defense wrong. Sanders is going to be a huge part of it, along with Drew Sanders and Rocket Sanders. All the Sanderses need to be able to be playing well for the Razorbacks to win. And then let me go ahead and single out the one player that I'm very excited about for Alabama because we've talked about the wide receivers needing to step up. Ja'Cory Brooks is a very talented sophomore from Florida. And what we saw last week was a career performance. He had 6 catches, he had 117 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns against Vanderbilt. He was one of the most important receiving targets for Bryce Young in this game. And I think that we saw Ja'Cory Brooks flash just a moment when they had the injury issues at wide receiver last year. Couldn't quite get it done in the national championship game. He's got another offseason of development, more of an understanding of the responsibility that he carries. So Ja'Cory Brooks might be the answer for how Alabama gets more out of its wide receivers. And I think that the Arkansas pass defense presents a great opportunity for him to continue on that great performance against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, 10 receptions so far this season, 179 yards, and those 2 touchdowns. All right, lastly, let's get a gameplay here, gentlemen. The line 17.5 to Alabama on the road. The total set at a healthy 61.5 points. Where you're putting your money on this one, Chip?
I'm going to go with that over, and as long as it doesn't creep up to 9 touchdowns, aka 63, I'm going to continue to hand out that pick. This was 42-35 last year, and I do think that we're going to have Alabama with Bryce Young leading the way continue to score with ease. I don't think he's going to throw for 550 yards, but I think he's going to be able to lead the Crimson Tide down the field by picking apart this Arkansas secondary. And then on the other side, when you do have KJ Jefferson's ability to extend drives so many different ways, the Kendall Briles offense that Arkansas runs, both in terms of tempo, what it does to keep a defense a little bit bland. I think that this is going to be a spot where we see a whole lot of points. Again, 42-35 a year ago. This just at 61.5. I will take the over.
All right, I trust Alabama to win, but I don't trust Alabama to cover on the road. I think that hook at the end of that line is definitely a key number. But, like I said before, 4 of the last 5 true road games have been one-score games, including the Arkansas game last year. I think from a matchup perspective, Arkansas is tough. They win the battle at the line of scrimmage, and we know Alabama on the offensive line has not been good, and we don't know if they've fixed those problems yet. And I think Arkansas, with Bumper Pool and Drew Sanders in that linebacker spot, they can get really creative. Barry Odom knows his secondary is a weakness, so he's going to get Drew and Bumper involved in a variety of different ways. I think it's going to be, look, Alabama might control it throughout. That's fine. But if I can get a 17 and a hook on a true road game for Alabama right now, based on the way they've played over the last year plus on the road, I'll take it. So give me the Hogs to cover, but I do think Alabama wins and might win relatively comfortably.
College football writers and discussers Barrett, Sallee, and Chip Patterson breaking down our SEC Game of the Week on CBS. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Yeah, that game from Razorback Stadium, part of a college football double header for you this Saturday. Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, and our own Jenny Dell will be there for that one at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The other game we have is before that one from Falcon Stadium as Air Force hosts Navy. Now the Falcons looking for their third straight win over the Midshipmen. That game underway at noon Eastern Time. And for more from the world of college football, be sure you're checking out Chip, Barrett, Tom Fornelli on the Cover 3 podcast. The latest episode has the coaches from Kent State on to break down the Golden Flashes season so far. Really love that we're getting some coaches on there to break things down. Download and follow the Cover 3 wherever you get your podcast audio.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.